Welcome to Cybersecurity Sense, a weekly podcast providing updates and insight into the latest in cybersecurity, brought to you by LBMC Information Security. Now, here's your host.
Hi, I'm Bill Dean, Senior Manager here at LBMC Security. Thank you for joining us, and please accept my apologies for the amount of time since my last podcast. Incident response practices often have spikes in workload. Well, we were in a 3-month spike, but I'm so glad that we've added a couple of very talented resources to the group. Today, we're going to discuss purple teaming. Next week, I plan to discuss attack simulation, and we'll actually be doing a webcast later this month on both of these topics, so stay tuned for that. First, let's just go ahead and define what is purple teaming. Most penetration testers are considered the red team, and most defenders are considered to be the blue team. The irony of a conventional pen test is that these two groups typically they're pitted against each other to see who's going to win. Therefore, when red teams and blue teams are actually working together, now you have a purple team. So why has this not always been a thing, you might want to ask? Well, red teamers often do not want to disclose their methods of compromising networks, and blue teamers often do not like to disclose their secret sauce for defending their environment. One has to ask why. The goal is to secure the environment. That is it. If the attackers share how they are succeeding and the defenders help the attackers to understand the controls they want tested, doesn't this accomplish the goal of defending the environment? Yes. Welcome to purple teaming. Trust me, we are all still a little baffled as to why it took so long for this to become a thing. If everything in the purple team exercises goes as planned, one or both groups will improve. This is a win-win situation. Yes, purple teaming has become somewhat of a buzzword, but behind the effort, it has merit and actually has great value. The overall goal is, based on the maturity of the client, is to deliberately test the blue team's processes, people, and technologies to confirm or deny the defense capabilities. It is more about testing assumptions and gaps. These can be huge or they can be relatively small. They can be part of a conventional penetration test, or purple teaming can be a standalone set of services. Proper planning is one of the most key components to ensure success. In the planning process, determine the controls and technologies that you want tested, and then determine what you expect. Here at LBMC, how we approach the exercise is, again, first choose the exercise that you want tested, and we're going to discuss some of these sample controls here in just a bit, but then determine your assumption as to how that control will function. We perform the test, provide the outcome, and then provide recommendations based on that outcome. So as a simple example, a client asked us to test the access control lists in place on their FTP SFTP server that should be preventing unauthorized IP addresses from accessing the service. Well, when we perform the test, we use different VPN services from around the world to try to access those FTP and SFTP servers and attempt to log in. Well, the outcome, to the surprise of the client, was that the implemented controls failed. They failed to block any of the attempts to access and log into the FTP and FTP servers from any source IP addresses. A control that they were relying on was not working. Outcome 2 was that event logging did not detect or alert on the brute force passwords attempts against the FTP SFTP servers from any of the IP addresses. So the recommendation 1, identify the implemented controls that did not block the IP addresses as designed from accessing the SFTP and FTP servers. Perform the needed changes to ensure that the unauthorized IP addresses will be blocked in the future. Recommendation 2, determine why no alerts were generated by the brute force password attempts on the FTP SFTP servers. Perform the needed changes to ensure that brute force attempts will be logged and alerted on in the future. So that's one example of what you can test. Some other very common ones that we're often testing are IPS blocking. So if you have an intrusion prevention system, is it functioning how you foresee it? Many times on IPSs, companies will enable geo-blocking based on hostile countries. Have you tested that to determine whether or not you are actually blocking traffic from hostile countries or nation states? When people are performing recon on the external space, would you know that? Would you see any alerts if someone is running Nmap or if they are running Nessus scans against your environment? From the inside, C2 traffic or beacons. If malware were beaconing out to a command and control, would you be able to see that? Would your content control keep you from accessing or communicating with an unknown or an uncategorized website? Is your egress filtering working the way that you think that it is? Events and alerts on password spraying. A lot of our penetration tests are successful because we're password spraying common passwords on external portals. Everyone likes to test their endpoint malware controls, whether it's next-gen antivirus, whether it's whitelisting. That is a very common one. Data exfiltration. Would you see large data exfiltration leaving? DOP, antivirus alerting, lateral movement or privilege escalation, brute force attempts on external portals and web applications, Exchange mailbox compromises, whether it's through OWA or O365. Would you know if someone's mailbox, an executive or someone in payroll, would you know if their mailbox had been compromised? This one is becoming very popular. Network access controls, proper multi-factor authentication setup and deployment. And again, that is not an exhaustive list. It's just common services that we're testing. And definitely each time we're engaged with a client, they have something new that they would like to test, and we just kind of add it to the list. So many times when describing this service to our clients, we're often asked, aren't we already doing this with our penetration test? My answer is almost always no. And here's why. Most of the time, your defenders or your blue teamers are typically not aware that the test is occurring. The penetration testers or the red teamers often are not interested in testing the effectiveness of your controls. They're simply looking for vulnerabilities that they can use to exploit the system or the network. So some takeaways. Your pen tests, even if your folks are defending, aren't the same as collaboration in a purple team exercise. Purple team does not have to be an annual event. If you deploy a new control, have the attackers or the red teamers work with your blue teamers to test that control to be sure that it's working the way that you anticipate. Some upcoming speaking engagements. I will be speaking at Misty's eSummit on insider threats on July 12th. More information on this will be in the show notes. So in closing, thank you for listening. Tune in next week for an episode that is going to be discussing the attack simulation. As always, if you have a particular topic that you would like to hear in this podcast, please contact me at bdean@lbmcsecurity.com. To learn more about LBMC Security and the services we provide, please visit lbmcsecurity.com. Thank you.